Welcome everyone to Fulfillment Fund's Career Speaker Series. We are so excited to have with us today Lee Eisenberg. Lee is an Emmy-nominated film and TV writer and producer whose credits include The Office, the long-standing TV series with Steve Carell, who was a writer for 5 seasons, as well as a co-executive producer and director for 2 episodes. More recently, he was a creator, writer, and executive producer for Little America and We Crashed, both on Apple TV+. And on the film side of things, he was a writer and producer for the film Bad Teacher, starring Cameron Diaz, as well as more recently, Good Boys. Did I miss anything, Lee? Anything
I thought that was very comprehensive. I thought you did it.
Okay, excellent. So I'll just start off by asking you, did you always know you wanted to be in TV and film?
No, I actually didn't really know that those jobs existed. I went to college and I didn't really know what I wanted to major in, and I didn't totally understand what jobs felt like. Like I had a hard time imagining the jobs that existed out in the world, the real ones. So my freshman year of college, my best friend and I wrote a script over the summer, and we thought we were so smart and so funny, and the script was terrible. But then the next summer we wrote another script, and then the next summer we wrote another script. And I really took to it. Like I loved movies. I loved comedy. I loved storytelling. And it was really kind of the first time in my life that I started working really hard and kind of like working towards something. And then I moved out to LA and then continued to write and was an assistant for about 5 years before I started making money as a writer.
But you clearly had, like a creative spark, and there was something in you that kind of compelled you to write that first script. Like, what was it? Was it, you felt like you had a story to tell, or you wanted to like please audiences? What was sort of that, original spark?
I mean, a few things. Like the fantasy of being a writer or being in Hollywood, it's like you watch movies and you watch TV and you're like, oh my God, like, what if I told my story? Or what if I told the story about my friends or about my parents or whatever? And then it's really hard to actually sit down and do it. And I loved to make people laugh. that was always something that was really appealing to me. I didn't know that you could make a career out of it. It all felt very abstract. I grew up outside of Boston. And so like, it wasn't like there were people in my life that were doing it. If I wanted to be a dentist, I knew a dentist. And if I wanted to be if I wanted to work in real estate, I probably could have found a realtor to intern with. But like being in Boston, like you're not really in it. So like I said, it all felt abstract, but it was just, it was always a passion of mine.
Do you recall, certain movies or TV shows that you watched when you were growing up that kind of inspired you originally?
I think Seinfeld was a huge inspiration for me.
Mm-hmm.
All those kind of like 80s comedies, like the Harold Ramis, Ivan Reitman, John Hughes movies, Ferris Bueller's, Ghostbusters, Breakfast Club, Animal House, Stripes, Caddyshack, like all of that stuff. I mean, I probably have seen those movies like 100 times each.
Gotcha. That's amazing. I think, finding that spark early on, you were fortunate to have found that, and then, continue to pursue it and just explore what that means. What did you end up majoring in college, and did that help you along your path?
So I was an English major, but I had a concentration in creative writing. Being a storyteller, sitting in a room with other people and getting critiques on your work. In that I was like writing short stories. I wasn't writing scripts. But I think being around other people and, like I said, having your work kind of battle tested a little bit, and people saying like, oh, I didn't think the opening worked as well, or I love that moment. I wish we could have seen that earlier, or I wish I could have seen it again, or whatever. That was really useful. But again, like every career path has its own thing. Like I think I really learned the most after moving out to LA and just reading scripts on my own. My college didn't have any screenwriting, so I read a lot of scripts, a lot of good scripts, a lot of bad scripts, and I just did it. I kept writing, and everyone loves movies and TV, right? Like in the same way that everyone loves music, and there's a difference between being a fan of something and being a student of something. And so when you really read a script critically and you're like, oh, nothing's happened for 8 pages, or, oh my God, you just found out that such and such happened on page whatever, or the end of Act 1 was here. Like, oh, I see the way they're doing these jokes. Like, you start kind of learning these little exercises. It's not that writing is never easy. Like, if I were to have to write today, I would like start sweating profusely and be terrified. But I have like more tools than I had when I was 20.
That makes sense. That makes sense. What was it that helped you continue on with your screenwriting, even when you weren't getting paid to do it originally?
Part of it was I grew up outside of Boston, and I think when I moved out to LA, it's quite a distance. And I think everyone kind of felt like, well, eventually it's not going to work out, and then you move back to Boston. Like, that just was like, whether it was spoken or unspoken, I think that's the way people treated my first few years in LA. Because I really wasn't making, my friends were starting to have real jobs and going to grad school and working at banks and, becoming doctors or whatever. And I was like fetching coffee and like helping my boss move and picking up people's prescriptions. And you know what I mean? Like, I was real kind of grunt work. I was terrified of going back home and like kind of having to admit defeat. And I would just get like enough of a nibble. Like, every time that I wanted to quit, I would just get like, just somebody who was a professional to say like, oh, that script's pretty good, or you should keep writing, or an agent would say like, oh, I want to read your next thing. And like these little tiny, like little breadcrumbs kind of existed on the path that let me, foolishly or not foolishly, continue on.
What is your typical, I guess your job has changed over the years, but in today's world, what is a typical day like in your job today?
Yeah, I mean, I balance a lot of different things now. So I write, I produce. Well, I guess those are the two things I do. But I have multiple projects, and so from day to day, it's very different. So if you would ask me this question, a month ago, I would say, well, I'm spending 90% of my time in the edit. I'm working on a new show for Apple called Lessons in Chemistry, which will come out in the fall, and I'm just editing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll step out of the edit to take a Zoom. I'll do this. Now the edit is done. And so most of my time is spent Zooming with other writers on things that I'm producing, that I'm developing with other writers, and I'm trying to give them notes and give them my thoughts on their scripts. And then I'm carving out time to start working on new ideas for me. So I have a few ideas that I'm just starting to kind of kick around. And so giving myself time during the day to figure that out is really, it's essential.
Gotcha. And define what you mean by producing. Of course, that means, making the whole show, but like nuts and bolts, what does it mean to be a producer?
Well, producer can mean a lot of different things. So for what I do, my purpose is like, some producers like go over the budget and really like, they're kind of like the nuts and bolts people who hire, the camera, not the camera operators, but like the grips and the Teamsters and the craft service people and that sort of thing. I am kind of like, I guess I'm like the CEO of a company.
Mm-hmm.
That's more the showrunner. I guess as a producer, I either have my own ideas that I don't have time to write, or that I think somebody else might write better than me, or somebody might come to me with an idea. And then my job is to kind of craft the best version of their vision. So it's not mine. And I mean, I have a lot of opinions and thoughts, but I always say to the writers, like, I wouldn't start with a writer that I didn't think we shared a similar version of what we want the show to be. If it feels like from the beginning, like if I have an idea and I bring it to a bunch of writers, I'm not going to work with someone who wants to make it animated and make it a period piece if I see it as contemporary and live action. But once you're kind of, you find someone that you're kind of speaking the same language, and then it's really about giving them notes, talking about, who could direct it, talking about who could star in it, convincing the network to make it. And then, there's all these things along the way, like there are budget issues. And so even though I'm not the person who's like hammering down the budget, like I'll call and say like, we need an extra day to shoot. We need more money for music. We need more locations, and all these things cost money and time. And the people at all these places, their job is to say no and find a solution. And I'll help hire the other writers on the show. Like I said, I'll help hire the directors, and you're really there to kind of like prop a project along.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And a showrunner, you said, is like the CEO of a show, so overseeing
Or a company.
or a company.
Well,
Okay.
it's like a startup. I mean, you start from
Yeah.
nothing. So like I have an
Mhm.
idea, and the idea is one sentence, and it's like, what if a bunch of people, whatever, got stuck on an island? And then I have to take that one idea and turn it into a script, and then theoretically the show has been greenlit, and then have to hire my writer's room. And so I'll have writers for maybe 20 weeks, and we're working to kind of generate the other episodes. And meanwhile, I have to hire the director, and the studio and the network say like, your budget is $5 million per episode. And I say like, no, I need it to be 6 million. And so you're getting into all those things. And so it's incredibly creative, and you're the author of the story, but you're also the business person who's fighting the fights.
Totally.
And when two actors don't get along, you have to go to their trailer, and you have to, broker the peace. And when somebody feels like they're not being heard enough, or any of the kind of HR issues.
Managing all the team dynamics.
Yeah. And so you really are wearing all these different hats. And you work very closely with the director, and all of these different things. And then when the show wraps, you start editing, and you're sitting in the edit, and you've hired the editors. And then after that, you're doing the sound. And so like today I have playback in a few hours, and basically they will play like with the best sound ever. They'll play the episode back for me, and I'll say like, can you make like the car door slam a little louder? And the music comes in a little too softly here, but I really want it to swell there. And, the secretaries in the background, can they be like clacking on typewriters instead of being on phones? And so you're creating kind of like the sound of the show. And that's just another part. That's the kind of the final part of the process.
That's so cool. Thank you for that detailed description. That's really helpful for our students and those of us who live in a different world.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and your job is incredibly diverse. What for you is your favorite part?
That is a very good question. I really like all parts of it. And I also, when I'm working on one, I'm ready for the next a little bit. So I think like kind of first and foremost, I view myself as a writer. And so the thing I probably like most is like sitting in a room with other writers and like starting the ideas of like generating what the story could be. I don't love sitting by myself. A lot of writers love to be alone with their thoughts. I don't totally love that part of it, but I do it often. Being on set can be a little tedious. It's like you're on set for 12 hours, and maybe you'll shoot 5 pages worth of material. So it's like you're on set for 12 hours, and 5 pages is like, about 5 minutes worth of material. It just takes a long time to get through.
Totally. Are there any skills that you would give advice to a high school student, or that like looking back when you were younger, maybe in high school, what skills you would have liked to develop at that point in your life for this career?
Read. Really, like I said before, it's like there's a difference between saying like I love movies and being like a student of movies. And so I think it's about reading scripts. I think it's about reading articles and watching movies, and kind of saying like when you start thinking about like three act structures and stuff, like that sort of thing. And so I think that's really important. And I think it could be like, and then I think it's finding people that share your same interests, whether you want to be a screenwriter, or you want to be a musician, or you want to be a lawyer. Like, when you find people that kind of have the same interests as you, you can start finding your community. And I think that's something that's really crucial for anything.
Definitely, definitely. Along the same lines, did you get any advice from a mentor or a boss when you were starting out, or just, along the course of your career that's been helpful and things that you draw upon as you proceed?
I mean, I think that like when I worked on The Office, my boss, Greg Daniels, you kind of just, it's like you parent the way that you were parented, or you parent in the opposite way because you didn't like the way you were parented. And so much of the way that I run a show is the way that Greg ran a show. And Greg was very collaborative. An idea could come from anywhere. It wasn't very hierarchical in terms of like, oh, well, you've been here for this long. And like the best idea would win. If the best idea came from an assistant, then that idea would go into the show. And if the best idea came from the person who's been writing comedy for 30 years, then that idea would end up in the show. So that was really important. I think Greg also did a really good job of bringing you into all parts of the process. So we got to edit our own episodes. We got to cast our own episodes. And again, there was someone overseeing it and, saying, no, I don't like your, I don't like your choice for the cast or whatever it is. But really, like, there was that trust. And I think that was really crucial.
What challenges have you encountered along your path to get to where you are today?
I mean, a lot of rejection. The first job I got hired as a writer was on the show called JAG, which was this military courtroom show. And I got fired. So it was like, I've been waiting my entire life to get hired as a writer. And then like 3 months later, I was fired. And that was just like, just a devastating, horrible experience. And like, really makes you question what's happening. And yeah, I mean, look, you invest a lot of time and effort, and it's very personal to create something and then for it not to work out. And so there's plenty of shows that I've spent years on, and then for whatever reason it doesn't happen. It's hard. I worked on Ghostbusters. There's going to be the sequel to Ghostbusters that I worked on for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and we got like, the studio was going to spend, I don't know what the budget was. Let's $100 million, $80 million, like a crazy amount of money. And the movie just didn't come together at the last minute. That's it. It was over. And it was like, I have a script that I think is very good. And that's the end of that. So that's always hard.
What is it that keeps you going when you're in those down moments?
Money. No, I'm just kidding. I think that like, you want to beat yourself a little bit. Like I'm obsessed with The Office. I'm so proud that I worked on it, and I'm really proud of the work I did on it. Like, you're only as good as your last thing. And so it's really fun and scary and exhilarating and thrilling to get things made. And so to get something made and you're like, oh, but what if like, I've never seen this version of a story before. Like Good Boys, there had been a million movies about like high school kids trying to lose their virginity, or they have a crush on the girl, or whatever the thing is, or they're gonna get beer, and you'd never seen that with 6th graders. And so it's like, what's the 6th grade version of that? And so I think that was exciting to us. It felt like, how can you do something that hasn't really been seen before, but still has some of the kind of like the familiar tropes that and so like that was a fun project. And we crashed. I'd never really done an hour-long drama like that. And so that was fun and scary and different, and writing about real people and arguing with legal about what you could say and not say. Like, they all have their own kind of challenges, and then, their own rewards. And it's, some writers and directors and actors like can't watch their own stuff. And I like watching my own stuff. It really brings me back to, it feels like photos to me. It's like when you go through an old album, like, if I watch an old episode of The Office, like I can remember where I was sitting, like right off of set. I remember like giving this line to this actor here. Like, it feels like nostalgic in a cool way.
Right. Where do you find where do your ideas come from? What do you draw inspiration from?
I mean, ideas, I don't know. Like, ideas come from everywhere. Like, and sometimes an idea just sits in your head, and it just kind of, you don't even know what to do with it. Like, I have no idea if I'll ever do anything with this, but I had the idea the other day. I was like, what if someone has a dream and then somebody else has a dream and it's the same dream. And like, what would that mean if like people's dreams were interconnected? And that's it. I have no idea what that is. I don't know if that is a sci-fi thing. I don't know if that's a comedy. I don't know if that will never see the light of day. It probably will never see the light of day. But I thought there was something kind of creepy and maybe like horror about people having the same dream. And like, is someone invading people's dreams? Anyways, is that a great idea? Probably not. But like, that's like, I don't know how that got into my head. I probably had a dream and then was like, oh my God, what if someone had the same dream as me? And that was the beginning of that. You know, I write things down all the time. I kind of keep like on my phone, I keep little notes, and the notes are sometimes like, you know, big ideas. And then sometimes they are literally like overhearing someone at a coffee shop saying something. And I'm like, furiously scribbling it down.
So you're sort of kind of always aware, you're paying attention to your surroundings as well for ideas, would you say?
Yeah, I think if you're going to do anything creative, it's like, where are you drawing inspiration? And it's like, you're drawing inspiration from your friends, you're drawing inspiration from being at the DMV. You're like, you just have to be kind of like, you have to be aware of everything around. You don't have to be, but you know, if you said, come up with an idea right now, I wouldn't be able to, but I might, you know, I might have 5 ideas driving around and in the shower, and then you wake up and, you know, we wake up in the middle of the night and all that kind of stuff. And so you really, I don't know when ideas are going to present themselves. I'm terrified that like a new idea won't. That's really scary to me.
Yeah.
And then once you have the idea, you have to kind of like build it out. There's one thing to have a sentence, and then there's another thing to have, you know, 100 pages.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. We have time for one more question, I think. What is your advice to a high school student who might want to go into this field, your field?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think reading a lot is really important. Writing, being okay. Like, everything you write is going to be, the next thing you write will be better than the thing you wrote before, which is a very scary prospect. And so like, I remember when I wrote my first script and I was so proud of it, and I actually can't find it. It was like so long ago that there was not, I think email was just kind of starting to be a thing. But you know, getting notes and someone saying like, hey, this isn't working for me. My reaction back then would be like, well, but if I lose that thing, then that scene that I love. And like, now kind of having been doing this for as long as I have, it's like, oh, I'll just cut 30 pages. Like I will take away, if it's necessary. I'm not like gleefully doing it, but like, I'll cut out like my favorite scenes from a movie, and because they don't work anymore, and then find something that I think will work. And like, I have the confidence that like, I'll come up with something else good. Whereas before it would be like, you're trying to hold on to these things. And it's like, well, if you hold on to it, then you're not like fixing the problem. You know what I mean? And so I think that's something that like with time, and then, like I said, I think like finding community, like whether it's online or in person. You know, I feel I'm like I said, I'm more of a writer than a director, but like my friends and I would go off and we would try to like write and direct these like stupid little movies. And I moved out here with one of my best friends who, you know, was making the stupid little movies with me. And so I think that you need to find people that are doing the thing that you want to do. And if you don't have that, I think it's hard.
Totally. Are there online communities or like college-based communities or even high school-based communities where students who are interested in writing might find each other?
You know, I think that there's certainly a lot of like screenwriting competitions. Like there's the Blacklist, which is a big one. I think that would be a good place to start, where you can submit your stuff and you can get some feedback. I don't know of like things online per se. There's probably a million message boards and kind of that sort of thing. I haven't done that in so long that I wouldn't really know where to start. I would do it a little bit more. I think it's better to do in person anyways. And I would just like find 3 people that you're in school with that also like comedy horrors, or like animation or like action movies, and like start a movie club, and
Yeah.
everyone suggest a movie that they like, and then watch it, and then talk about why you liked it. And, that's the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And like pause movies and be like, look up what like 3-act structure is, and then watch your favorite movie and see how it applies to it. And you can also, you can, like, if you Google, screenplay structure, they'll name movies that maybe you haven't
Right.
seen. You can watch it and you can say like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Like right around the 30-minute mark, like, oh, the adventure begins. And then, oh, at the, 60-minute mark, like, oh, that was a twist that I wasn't expecting. And then at the 90-minute mark, like, things are bad. How are they going to get out of it? And then the end of the movie.
That's amazing. Thank you so much
course.
for sharing your journey, for sharing your background and your expertise with our students.